Hello, friends, and welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. I'm your host, Nicole Song. Today's topic is one that you might be familiar with, especially if you're an ambitious woman leader with a touch of perfectionism. So, as a recovering perfectionist myself, this is one I especially love to teach and to work on all the time. And today we're going to talk about exactly what it takes to release the pressure valve on yourself. I have been dealing with this a lot in 2024, so I am super excited to have this conversation with one of my mentors, Nicole Culver. She has helped me so much with the pressure I often place on myself and my goals. And she is a mom of three, a wife, and an entrepreneur herself. And so she really sets a beautiful example for how to release the pressure. And there was so much good learning in this episode, so make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end. And if you're an Asian American woman leader who wants to learn to make quick, powerful decisions using the language of intuition, I've got a private podcast that gives you the exact step by step to master intuitive communication patterns. DM me secret at Nicole Song on Instagram to get all of the good details. Okay, friends, without further ado, let's dive in to this extraordinary conversation. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being on the School of Self Worth. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about wherever this goes, pressure, mindset, all the fun topics.
Totally. Well, Nicole has been a mentor of mine, and and I love that we're both Nicoles. I feel like the group that we're in, like, there are so many Nicoles. It's kind of crazy.
All of a sudden, it's like I guess, I don't know if you were born in the 80s too, but I guess showing the decade.
Totally. Yeah, I think that is the case. And so, but I love it. And it's been such a great place of support and expansion for me. And one of the topics that we've been talking about recently, which I feel like will actually really resonate with all of the women who are listening who experience this themselves, is a lot about the pressure. And it's both pressure and like the pressure, I think of it as like the pressure valve of perfectionism. And so that's the area we're going to go into first. But what I would love, actually, Nicole, if you could share a little bit about your journey around being able to step into the life that you lead now. So, like, a little bit of background about yourself. And because this is a school of self worth, I always love to hear about women's journeys into that, because Nicole is a very successful entrepreneur. She has big communities and she's done a lot in her life. And like, I saw her on a stage in December in front of almost 1,000 people. And I think that those are things, whether that is actually your dream or not, the ability to say yes to opportunities like that, and the ability to say that, I think is a big challenge for people. And so I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit first about your own journey and how you have over time cultivated the self-worth to do the things that you do. And then we can get into the pressure talk after that.
If you had told me literally, like, when I was graduating college to be a teacher, like, I thought my whole life I would be in the classroom, truly, like, from as long as I can remember, I was going to be a teacher, like an elementary school teacher. That was my thing. I always worked with kids. Like, I worked at summer camps. I worked in daycares. I babysat from what I consider, now that I have an 11-year-old, I'm like, people left me with their kids at like 10. How did they do that? I always was going to be a teacher. So if you could rewind and go back to like when I was getting my first teaching job and told myself then what I do now, I would be like, you are so wrong. That is not her. That is not what I'm meant to do. That is not who I am. I'm just a teacher. That's truly, I mean that, like, from my core. So I was a fourth grade special ed teacher for 5 years, and I never even thought I would take a promotion from there. I never even saw myself as an admin. And really, towards the end of my third year of teaching, I don't know how far you want to go into this, but someone very close to me passed away, and it was just like I saw my life pass before my eyes, and I knew this wasn't my path anymore. I didn't know what was my path. I just knew that I couldn't stay. I knew I was not meant to work for someone else. I knew that I couldn't work for someone else 5 days a week indefinitely for the rest of my life with a group of people who didn't want to be where they were.
Could you talk a little bit more about like what that feels like? Like, did you in your body, or just like how you felt? Like, what was really going on for you at that time?
I think I was tricking myself into thinking I was happy because I had done the thing that I thought I would do my whole life, and I thought this was it. I thought I could do this for 25, 30 years. And when my aunt passed away, and she was someone who was just under a lot of stress all of the time, and I feel like she had so many things that she wanted to do that she didn't get to do. And when you see someone so close to you who just is like gone in a flash, I think you just have that moment where you're like, am I really happy? And like, is this it for me? I'm waking up in the middle of the night, on Sundays, being like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to teaching. Why am I continuing to do this? And that was really when I started to like create my exit plan, because I knew like this wasn't it. I don't know what is it, but this is not it, and I need to find a way out.
Yeah, and I think that's so resonant for so many people listening, and I know so many people in that position where that question sometimes I think we don't even ask, like, "Am I happy?" Because we're so used to it. We just are like, "I'm gonna plug away. I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna fight for it." And it sounds like for you, there was that big realization of what happened, and then it sounds like it still took you a couple of years, though, before you actually exited.
Yeah, it took me about 2 years just because I didn't wanna just, like, quit without a plan. So I needed to give myself some time, and I also, like, wanted to be smart about it, and I had student loans, and when you reach year 5, when you complete year 5 in New York, there was a student loan forgiveness program. So I knew if I could get to year 5, then I would have all my student loans forgiven, and I would be, like, 0, balance 0. And that's what I did. I waited until year 5, but I was doing things on the side. I was being a health coach. I was selling baked goods. I was taking one-to-one clients after school, like coaching on nutrition and helping people improve their life. So it was like a health coach, life coach type of situation that I had gone back to school online, which was like barely a thing at that point, because this was like 2008, 2009, 2010, long time ago. And I started to create my path. I started to create that thing that would give me a little bit of a safety net. And I say all this like I had a husband who was working a full-time job, so I did have even more of a safety net, but I didn't want to just jump without having something. I needed an exit plan.
And what would you say to so my experience of you, like current day Nicole is like very much in action, very much trusts herself, like has been building her business. But the Nicole back then, I'm sure didn't have that same energy and activation. Or maybe you already had some of those qualities. And I'm curious about what helped prompt you to like make the leap. And then how did you say to yourself, like when you questioned it, like, is this right? I don't know what I'm doing. Let me see. I'm going to get my question clear because I feel like it takes a lot of self worth to make these leaps. Like when we take these big leaps, it's really hard. It can be a time where you really are like doubting yourself. Is this the right thing to do? And what helped you stay on track at that time?
So this question has so much duality for me because I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I had no business doing, for lack of a better term, I didn't really have any business starting a business because I didn't know what I was doing. But I never questioned myself. I
Mm,
never said I shouldn't be doing this. I am the type of person that I go all in on a decision, a million percent. That doesn't mean I am not scared. I have a picture of myself on the phone quitting because it was over the summer, calling my principal. I was out of my mind scared, but there was I always go to the future, like in 5, 10 years from now, if I'm still at this job, if I'm still this miserable, what is the cost of that? And that is just like, no question. I knew
mm,
I had to go. I knew I had to do it. There was no uncertainty there. What the heck was going to happen? I had no idea, but I never questioned the decision.
Well, that's really powerful because I think that's the biggest part. Like our fear can get in the way, and we're like, I don't know if I can do this, and it actually stops people. But you were just like, well, I'm all in, and I'm scared, and it's okay.
Well, why do we get I think it's really important, and I don't know that I thought like this then, but I it's hindsight. Money money is important to me, and like paying our bills is important to me, but money is not number one. Like that's not what I'm measuring against. It was the happiness and the joy factor that was number one. And I think a lot of times we put money as the number one value when it's
Mm.
actually not. We just like we don't actually have our values mapped out so concretely. So we have all of this overwhelm and all of this jumbledness in our head, but for me, money was not number one. It was truly like the type of life I wanted to live was number one. And when I measure it against that value, teaching was not the thing. So I knew even if we struggled with money for a little while, we would be okay. And we struggled with money, I think, way longer than I would have anticipated or that I would have liked. But my quality of life and like my day-to-day happiness was so much more. And that was what I was going for.
Mm. Well, I feel like that's really powerful because a lot of times, and I know for many of the women listening, like you can tie to the idea of like your job is the security. And then that's where, like, and it's even though you're not really that free within the job, they're like, oh, I just have to stay anyway, even if it's not a great fit anymore.
Yeah. I had someone message me not that long ago who I used to work with, and we were like pretty good work friends. And she was asking me how everything was going. And this was probably like 3 years ago at this point. And she was like, yeah, well, I only have 10 years left. And I was like, cool. What am I going to say to her? But to me, I was like 10 years. And then I always go to my kids and I'm like, okay, well, this one will be in college and then I immediately am like, no, like 10 years of your life, like you don't know, you could, like, not to be like dark, but you could be dead in 10 years and then what? So what are you living for truly? Because if it's just the paycheck, then okay, that's totally fine, but most people don't want to live just for the paycheck. And money, you could make money anywhere, truly. So what is number one? What is the most important thing? And are your daily actions in line with it? And I don't know. Most people, we live in the weird space of entrepreneurship where maybe yes, but I think most people would say no.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there is this leap, and I'm interested in this part of it into that place of really understanding the possibility of what you're doing when you leave because it can be so restricting mentally, I think, for people in jobs and climbing a corporate ladder. But then when they make the leap, it can feel almost overwhelming and so scary. Like all that possibility is like almost too big. And I'm kind of curious how you kept yourself anchored while going through this whole journey of like opening your food business and getting to the place you are today.
This is going to sound way too simple, but it's just one step at a time. Like I always had really big goals and really big dreams, and I still do, but I tried to not lose sight of like, well, what's the most important thing today? And truly, like, what can I do today? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do by the end of the week? And this, I think, is where being a teacher really helped me because I was always very like, let me plan, let me be organized, let me have an action plan. And that kind of carried over to this. But I'm not. And this is where a lot of people get overwhelmed. And we see this in our space too, where they're like, okay, I want to go from 0 to 6 figures, 0 to 100K for the year, and then the overwhelm of just thinking about what that's going to take. And you have to know yourself because some people that amps them up and they're super empowered and they're like, yes, let's get to 6 figures. But other people are like, oh my gosh, that's going to require so much. And then that's where I go, okay, but your business is built one by one, two by two, three by three. Like, let's just try to get to one this week and then we'll worry about getting to two the next step. So it really is figuring out like what does need to be done today? What does need to be done by the end of the week? What does need to be done by the end of the month? And keeping yourself grounded in the logistics of it while being open to the possibility.
Mhm. Yeah, and that leads perfectly really into the topic that we were talking about originally, which is like pressure and perfectionism. So I'm totally a recovering perfectionist. You have coached me through this many
Mm.
times where I'm like, and I have this tendency to go back into it because it's like I have these big dreams too, and I want to reach them. And then what can happen for anybody, whether you have the big dreams or you might just be putting that kind of pressure on yourself to perform daily for whatever reason in your job and in your life, like what would you say to people? Like, how did you cope whenever you felt that coming up, like pressure on yourself? Because I'm curious, did you put pressure on yourself, especially once you left that job?
Yeah, and this is something I don't want anyone to think I'm immune from pressure. I'm not. I deal with it differently, and it's not perfect. So I'll still have moments of pressure, and sometimes I know, like, okay, you need to walk away and like take a beat. And like, if you think of pressure like a big filled up balloon that's about to explode, I don't want it to explode. I just want to let the air out a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is figure out what is going to help me let the air out a little bit. And usually now I know, like, okay, well, this means walking away, this means taking a walk. This means putting on music. This means something that is probably not work related, to just let the air out of the balloon. But this comes from years of practice of this. I would definitely let the balloon explode from pressure. Now I have gone through so many years of this and so many phases of this that I'm like, okay, pressure is going to happen. It's inevitable. How do I move with pressure? Well, I don't. I just have to figure out what's going to relieve the pressure. So, yes, of course, I've put pressure and still put pressure on myself this week, like it's not something that I'm not it's kind of like fear. I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to move through it. So once you understand that it's something that's going to come up, it's something that it's part of the game, it's part of the experience. So I'm not trying to avoid it. I'm just trying to figure out, how do I move through this in the way that's going to help me, that's going to be for my highest good.
Mm. Well, sometimes I find this for myself, and I know this happens with my own clients and women I work with that they want to like really understand the cause of it, like the cause of pressure or the cause of perfectionism. And everything you just said had none of that in there. And I'm curious for you, like how you think of that part of it. Like, is it helpful to identify it? Is it helpful to go back and be like, this is what's creating that pressure within myself? Or do you feel like it's better to actually relieve the pressure itself and just move forward from there?
So I don't want to speak in like absolutes ever. So, but for me, I'm just going to talk about what works for me, because I probably would have also handled this differently. But for me, when I'm at the height of feeling pressure, is it going to serve me or any of the people I'm dealing with to try to figure out the root cause of that moment? Or is it going to help to just diffuse the situation? If you think about I would think about everything in terms of relationships. If I'm in like an argument or something with my husband, is it going to help to try to diagnose him why he's angry and to try to be like, hey, Dan, I see you're angry. What's the root cause of this? Or is that going to make him like more stressed, more angry, have more pressure? Or do you just walk away and say, like, let's just take a beat? Well, let's revisit this conversation when we are feeling a little bit more regulated. And that's how I think about this too now, is like, it's not going to serve me to try to figure out the why right now. The thing that's going to serve me and allow me to move through this is to just relieve the pressure. And then when I'm more regulated with time, then I can go back and say, like, well, what happened here from like a curiosity point of view? But I don't think we can, at least for me, I have not found it beneficial to try to like diagnose why this is coming up for me in the moment.
Yeah, I agree because I feel like there's so much around when we are actually letting it ourselves off the hook
Mhm.
is when we can actually start to figure things out. But in that moment, it's not going to help at all. And what would you say too? Like you said, over the years, you've learned to just like dial it down. Like, how do you start to recognize within yourself, like you're putting that pressure on? Because sometimes I think when we're in that moment, we're just like, all right, I'm going to send more emails. I'm going to just like dial in and like sit at this desk and just make it go away that way.
Yeah. I think it comes down to, I used to be someone, so I preface all of this with like, I've been doing this for 12 and a half years at this point. I've made so many mistakes and worked from a place of like high stress. And I just try to not come from that place anymore. And I think now it's like in my body where it's like if I, you feel just like constrictive and you feel that like pressure in your body. If I'm feeling like that and I'm like, I have to send more emails so this happens, then that's where I'm usually like, oh, that's really interesting. No, that's not where we work from. And that's when I'm like try to back off. And sometimes I don't want anyone to think, and Nicole, you know this about me, it's not like I'm gonna take like 3 weeks and like get really aligned before I move again. No, it's usually quick at this point. But if I'm feeling constrictive in my body and pressure in my body, then that's when I try to like relieve it so I can, because I want, the work we do is so important. I always want it to be filled with like the most expansive energy so people can like feel the possibility versus coming from a place of like constrictive and I have to. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, completely. And I think a lot of times for so many of the women that I'm working with where and for myself too, it's like we get into this place of like I want to have it be perfect, which it's not possible, right? Instead of just being okay with like putting one foot in front of the next and having it be like maybe we're going to mess up, maybe we're going to have a little failure along the way, make a mistake, and that's totally fine. But we put so much pressure on ourselves to not do that. And then when you get hung up on that, that's when you're just like, I'm not going to let go versus actually just like kind of think of it as just like this total clench in your hands and face. And then just being like, okay, let's just like take our hands off the reins just for like 5 minutes and then see how you feel afterward instead.
Yeah. And what I would say to that too is like when you truly can accept that failure is part of the process, it's not something that is avoidable. It's just not. It's part of the gig. It's kind of like if you were teaching a kid to ride a bike and you were like, "Okay, I'm going to help you never to fall off the bike." That's it's no it's no it's literally impossible. And if you're trying to help a kid learn to ride a bike and avoid falling, they're probably not ever going to get on the bike. The goal isn't to avoid falling. The goal is to learn how to ride. And how do you learn how to ride? By riding. Yes, you're going to fall, but it's part of it. And that's how I think about failures is like it's part of it. It's not a big deal. You fall off the bike, sometimes it's a tiny fall, sometimes it's a bigger fall, but it's not about the fall, it's about the getting back on again. So I'm not ever doing anything to not fail. I'm doing it to learn how to ride. And how do you do that? By riding. So I think it's a whole different energy when you are going about your day trying not to do something versus just thinking about the goal and getting to the goal.
You know, it reminds me of one of my friends recently, I can't remember, like in the last year was moving jobs and she hadn't changed, I think, in like a decade. And we were talking about it, and I was saying to her, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but like I just was like, I think you're just out of practice. Like you're out of practice of trying something so bold and big, and like you don't really know what that is like. And I think a lot of times with, especially with failure, because as a kid, you fail constantly, right? You're trying new things. You have kids, like they're always
Mhm.
trying things and they don't really care if they fail or not. I mean, they might have some cares depending on the situation, but like in general, they're in this place of growth and expansion because that's what it's like to be a kid. And I think about this like when I used to write a fitness column, and that I had to like fail constantly because I was trying new things every week, and there's just no way I could have mastered 300 types of movement in all those years. Like I just had to keep failing. But I often think for adults, like we get in this idea of like I know how to do something. And so I want to stay in the lane of the things I know how to do versus being practiced at failure. And I'm curious what you think about that idea of like, how do we just keep practicing, like you said, learning and growing and knowing that failure is part of the process rather than trying to avoid it?
I think we're so used to just being comfortable and like being comfortable. We associate being comfortable with being safe. And it's totally a skill. It is totally a habit. It's totally something you can practice. And I think we also have gotten really used to not having any resilience. And you build resilience by practicing, exactly like you just said. It's a skill and it's a habit. And we get to say, like, well, if I want to grow, I can't just sit on my couch. I can't. That's not what life is. I have to get outside of my comfort zone. So when you can show yourself and your brain and your subconscious that actually getting uncomfortable is safe and you start to build that resilience, that's where you get outside of your comfort zone. That's where, that cliche line, it is true, growth is outside of your comfort zone. But I think for so many of us, we're so used to, our norm is just like this, like, mediocrity of just like being slightly unhappy, being slightly anxious, being comfortable all the time. And anything outside of that we see as bad, when it's like, okay, but if you want a change, then you're going to have to do something different.
Right. And then I think of it as like, okay, like how do we build our resilience so that when we do start to take some risks, the failure doesn't feel like it's going to knock us back on our butts and we can't get up again.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just like riding a bike. It's practice. The first fall might hurt. They might all hurt, but you're in practice of them. And it's kind of like the first time you get a not great comment on Instagram or something like that. The first one might sting the most. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, I don't think it should be like anyone is in practice of receiving them, but you realize, well, this actually isn't about me. It's about them. So it's totally a practice.
Yeah. Well, what would you say for someone who's like, okay, I want to get over this perfectionism. I want to start to practice fear of failure. What would be like one thing that they could do today?
I guess just go. Anytime you have, we talk about the mean manager sitting on your shoulder, anytime you feel the hesitation, you feel the resistance come up, instead of giving into the resistance, you do the opposite. And that's where you start to train yourself that it's safe to go. And instead of letting the time come in where you're just like, I'll just wait. When you hear that voice go, no, just wait. Don't put that out there. Don't take that action. Instead of that, you you say whatever it is, that vision, that voice that stops you, you just go and you just do the thing. And that is the only way you will teach yourself that, oh no, getting uncomfortable is safe. Meeting and moving through the resistance, it is safe. So as soon as you go to take the pause, instead of the pause, you just go and you run.
Mhm. I love that. Well, Nicole's been supporting me with like my mean manager. And so I love like that's her name now. Like I've never had a name for like my critic inside, but I was like, mean manager. That is like perfect. She's like just the meanest boss. And I'm like, let's not listen to her. We're going to listen to somebody else instead and like just go from there. So, such a powerful conversation, Nicole. I'm so grateful to you for just having that wisdom and share with everyone. And I know that everyone listening deals with this, right? That perfectionism and that intense fear of failure, and how powerful to help them start to shift out of that. So let's do this. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Yes, I am, but I will tell you, I have a hard time being brief. So I'm going to try really hard.
Oh, you don't have to be brief. It's just the questions are brief.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. What's the first one is what was the last thing you watched on TV?
Oh, Suits last night.
Oh,
That's easy.
lovely. Easy. Yes. Okay. And then what is on your nightstand?
Oh, what is on my nightstand? A tray and a lamp. That's it.
So simple. I love it.
So simple. Tells you a lot about me. It is very simple.
That's awesome. I actually feel like I learn the most about guests when I ask what's on their nightstand because it says so many things, you know?
Oh, so fun. That's a fun
Yeah.
question.
Okay. And when was the last time then you tried something new and what was it? Speaking of learning and growing.
Does Instagram Live count? Because that's a new thing I have been doing that is very challenging to me.
I think it does. Yeah,
Okay.
because you've been doing it consistently. Yeah.
I've been trying to. Once a week is my goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are you learning from it?
I also made a new recipe last 2 nights ago. So I'll say that too, because I was like, that's so boring. Of course, I brought up a business thing. So I made a new recipe and I bought curry powder for the first time. So that I will say is my side note because I did not want to just say a business thing there. What am I learning? I'm learning it's safe to be uncomfortable and like it's totally okay to let people see you sweat. Because
Mm.
the first time I went live, I was like, my face was getting red and I just called it out. I was like, I'm feeling nervous right now. And the response to that, just like the realness of it, it was like, it was so nice. And people were like, I'm going to do this too. I'm going to do something uncomfortable. It's like, it's okay. I think it's such a highlight reel to only show like the polished version. And that's also why I wanted to do it because I wanted to show people like, no one is perfect at this all of the time. And I'm still doing things that get outside of my comfort zone. And yes, I actually feel more comfortable speaking to almost 1,000 people on stage than going live on Instagram in front of like 4 people. Go figure why. I don't know. But like, that's what made me uncomfortable. And I just wanted to show the process of going from I'm feeling really nervous to then like my 5th one to being like, I'm less nervous now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great example of, and I think too, like when we do reveal, it's like so powerful for people because especially in the work you and I do, like we're always out there, we're always doing things and it can look like it's always so polished, which it is totally not. I cried on my podcast a few episodes ago. So like you just never know, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last one. What are your top 3 most used emojis on your phone?
Oh gosh. I feel like this is going to show my almost 40ness cuz the crying emoji, like the crying laughing emoji, for sure I'm trying to actually like get out of the habit of using it so much. I use it way too much. I'm just looking at my emojis like that definitely that one, definitely the one with the smile and the hearts. And the third one I would say is definitely all over the place. I don't know, but the 2 crying laughing emojis are probably say that's like 2 and then the heart, the love ones also.
I know. Are your kids telling you like, "Mom, you shouldn't use the crying laughing emojis?"
Um no, because my 11-year-old is just about the sweetest, almost like head in the clouds. Like she didn't her friends asked her to see Mean Girls and she's like, "What's Mean Girls?" I'm like, okay. No, also no, you can't see Mean Girls. It's not for you yet, but so no, my kids have not gotten, but when my little one will be the one to do that and she's only 5 so far, so it's only a matter of time.
Before I know. I use those. I know. I was like, I know it's not cool, but they really express how I'm feeling when I'm laughing at something. So I'm just going to use it.
I know, I agree.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being on. What's the best way for people to find out more about you or to reach you?
My Instagram, just Nicole Culver.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on. I loved having this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.